So let's get started. Did I do that? Okay, yeah, no, this is not an underwater talk. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm Daniel Henderson-Eade, pronouns are he, him. I'm a principal consultant at a small startup called Mantis & Co. And we focus on helping designers really understand accessibility, making it more fun again, and really kind of drive change so that when we get to audits and things down the line in engineering, many of the issues that we could have solved in design have hopefully been solved already. And we do that in many different ways, annotations, design systems, and tools as well. And so those can't see me. I don't know if there's any video. I don't think so. I'm a white male with ginger hair, red hair, whatever you call it, and kind of a doofy smile, some freckles. And today I'm wearing a blue shirt. And so I've worked on both accessibility teams and design system teams. CVS Health from Pinterest. I used to work for part of the government in the UK, but not Gov UK. Made that very clear. And a few other folks that apparently I'm not allowed to say in a recorded environment. But I kind of come to you as someone who has been on both teams and seen the struggles of both teams, and kind of trying to hopefully find ways to alleviate some of the issues that we found and help us work together more. And so that's who I am. I like to have these kind of talks be informal. I don't want you to sit here for 90 minutes in silence. So if you have questions throughout, please raise a hand or give me some sort of auction sign, a nod of the head or an elbow up or whatever you kind of do to raise the bid. I'll try and see you and ask a question. But to get started anyway, we're going to do a bit of a poll. A few polls, just so I get to know who you are, because I don't really know who, other than one or two at the back, who you all are. And I want to kind of get to know you a bit. So raise of hands in the chat, yes or no's, or however you want to kind of do it in the room. Doesn't have to be a hand raise. Who in here is a Texas resident? All right, that's cool. For those who aren't, welcome to Texas. I may not sound like I'm a Texas resident either, but I have been here for 5 years. I somehow made it here from England. My wife is from here, and so I love it in Texas because it's always sunny. So that is a win. So I'm glad I think we're getting 104 this week. So I hope you brought your sunscreen. We're going to be wearing it a lot, I think. Cool. Next question. Do you work in digital accessibility? Awesome. All right, we're at the right conference. So that's good. So, okay, now we get to some actual useful polls that will help me know you and get to know people in the room. Does your organization have a design system? Hey, there we go. So great to see so many people with design systems. How long have you been creating it for? Okay, so someone's creating it now, been creating it for a few months, one person and a half. I don't know how you do that, 1.5 people. To create design systems. So we've seen organizations create design systems now very in a formal capacity for about 3 years. They've been going on for much longer than that, but we've really seen investment, especially in the age where we want to do more with less resources. And we're seeing that in accessibility, we're seeing that in design systems, seeing it in every corner of the organization. Do you work closely with your design system as an accessibility professional? Raise your hand. Oh, that wasn't nearly as many as before. We only had about half. What did we get in the chat? Did we get some yeses and nos? No yeses and nos. That's all right. So yeah, we don't work very closely. Some of us do, which is great. Most of us don't work very closely with the design system team, which is exactly why I'm here today, and hoping that you come away with some ideas of how to do that more. Finally, have you worked on your organization's design system? Okay, so a few less hands, maybe about the same. And it doesn't have to be in a big capacity. It may just be in one pull request or one suggestion that got into it. Design systems are one thing I always love to tell people, and Dan Mal writes this in his book for the design that scales. Highly recommend it to anybody, even in accessibility, is people who work on a design systems team are just the full-time contributors, right? Everybody in an organization owns the design system and can contribute to it. It may not be set up that way, but that's how it should work in a mature environment. So try and find ways to do that if you can't already, or feel like you have some empowerment to do it. Okay, so we're done poll time, story time. I spent a long time on these animations, so I really hope you're enjoying them. For those again who can't see them, there's a little semicircle, that's what we call it, right? A semicircle looking at a book with its kind of eyes in love with whatever this book is. I'm not quite sure what the book is, about dinosaurs or something, but let's talk about those stories. So this is my best friend. His name is George, and I don't get to see him very often because I grew up with him in England. He was my next door neighbor for a long time, 15, 16 years in a little village. And I like saying the word village because in Texas, we never say the word village, it's always city. So it's really nice to kind of have this hometown environment, and there's plenty of lovely little towns in Texas, but they're never called a village. So this is my friend George. He looks very similar to me, apart from he's got black hair, and he has a very same goofy smile. We're not related in any way, we just happen to live close by. It must be something in the air. But for a long time, I didn't consider him my best friend. There's a little, here's in a land far, far away, United Kingdom, about 5,000 miles away from here. This is us. So here's me, a semicircle guy again. I gave him a little an orange hairdo. And then here's my friend George. I made him green because I know it was weird to make him any other color. We lived next door to each other in our same houses. Our parents were close. We were pretty close. He was my neighbor. We saw each other a lot. We went to he came to my soccer games. I came to his soccer games and watched them. But we weren't best friends because he was 3 years older than me. I wanted to work in tech. He wanted to build airplanes, and he is still building airplanes. He's working at Rolls-Royce in a place called Derby in the UK, and I've not seen him in 2 or 3 years at this point. But we didn't call my best friends. We had different priorities, right? I wanted to be in tech. I had different classmates. I had different sports to him. We just saw each other because we were next to each other. I would not know the guy or ever interact with him outside of just seeing him when I walked out the house. But as I got older, and now when I think about it, I do call him my best friend. I'd be my best man. Well, he's been the best man at my wedding. I've been the best man at his wedding. And I know he's a little kid now, and I get to see his little kid, and we were really, really close. And it's only because I realized over time that it's not about necessarily proximity that makes you close to each other, right? Like the design system teams and accessibility teams, it's the underlying things that bring us together. And I want to kind of remind you that for you as an accessibility professional, the design system isn't just a neighboring team, right? They may be close by physically or not physically in the organizational chart. It really depends on the organization, but please don't think of them as a neighbor. I want you to think of them as your most important relationship, or one of your most important relationships. And if it isn't right now, you should work on that this year, right? And we're going to do that together. Therapy time. I am not a licensed therapist. I was told legally I had to say this. This is couples counseling. I don't know how to do couples counseling. This may go horrifically wrong. This is just kind of my own personal experience. So and here's a little, not to say the diagram. The diagram is a little semicircle guy again with his mouth jaw dropped because he was not expecting to do therapy today, and I'm sure you all weren't either. We'll try and keep this out without bringing up anything out the closet. So let's do some couples counseling between our design system team and accessibility team. We're the accessibility team. The design system team is going to be on the board. We're going to try and work through some things together and see if we can come out the other side. So how we're going to do this sort of quick, we've got 60 minutes, well, 90 minutes, but we'll try and do it in less than that time so you can ask questions and we can talk afterwards. We're going to talk about our state of our relationship, any communication breakdowns we have with each other, opportunities for our connection to be stronger, and then we should kind of create some new relationship agreements that we can build our new relationship upon. Let's go. So, any questions so far, by the way? So you're very welcome to jump in. Cool. So the state of the relationship, and we have a little character here who's juggling all these priorities. And that was, I think we all kind of feel that all the time, whether it's at work, at home, or all of it together. Design system teams, accessibility teams, we have far too many things going on, and we're always just doing by the skin of our pants. So one thing I want to remind you is design system and accessibility teams have similar goals and face similar challenges. Right, we're all trying to scale best practices within the system. We're all trying to educate designers about a certain thing and hopefully make them better. Engineers, educate them about it, educate them about something, make our products better. But there's some kind of three underlying challenges that really connect, and I think that we can connect on together. So these, by the way, these challenges have come out from me talking to people, as well as design system reports, annual reports that come out about what teams have been worried about. So this is kind of backed by semi-useful and serious data, but it's still just surveys at the end of the day. Common challenge number one: how do we prove our value? Design system teams have been at this for a lot in the last 12 months, and I'm serious by a lot in the last 12 months, because all these articles that I'm about to share have been posted in the last 12 months, and they're all talking about design system metrics. And you may have heard that kind of that phrase, design system metrics. Here's one from designsystem.guide. We have another one from UXPin, another one from, I'm not sure where this is from, another one, the Fashion Magazine, Uberblog, designsystems.com, redesigning design systems. Even Figma on their blog is talking about design system metrics, because they obviously want their funding to pay for get more funding into Figma. Everyone is talking about design system matrix because we have spent so long in the design system community trying to advocate for design systems. Now business people want to see a return on investment. Kind of sounds familiar to the accessibility story, right? We've spent so long trying to say it's important. Business leaders are now wanting to know, where's that value, and where have I put that money in? Am I getting a return on that investment? Right? There's obviously much more than just a dollar value, but they want to know what that return is, and how do we communicate that is very difficult. And then we got a little scary die, because all these articles are a little bit confusing and scary. Common challenge number two: how do we scale this across many teams? Right? Design system teams are invented basically to make work easier at scale. Accessibility teams, again, we're usually trying to get accessibility to work across several designers, several engineers, several teams, several countries. We've got someone at the back over there who's got designers across the world. How do we get them all understanding accessibility? Right? Design systems are feeling the same way, but design systems are trying to scale much more than just accessibility, and not trying to and damper the efforts and difficulty of accessibility. There's lots of things to scale, but design systems are trying to scale design tokens, brand guidelines, content guidelines, design consistency, team efficiency, contributions, page templates, engineering best practices, design best practices, and accessibility best practices, right? So they're trying to scale a lot, and they're struggling, but they are trying to scale accessibility best practices, which is great that they said that. They really want to try and do that. So there's kind of the olive branch that they've probably put out to say, hey, we want to scale accessibility, but honestly, they don't really know how, right? That's great for us, because we can work together on that. Common challenge number three: how do we get leadership buy-in? There we go. There's another one. We talked about all talked about that all the time in accessibility. How do we get leadership buy-in? And it's constantly changing, because leaders seem to come in and come out willy-nilly, and each leadership we have has a different goals, different importances. This is from the Zero Height report, and this is a quote that I really loved and was really relatable to me as someone who's worked in accessibility for a while. Design system teams aren't scaling as fast as the rest of the product organization, meaning that demand is outpacing supply and resulting in high volumes of requests that are often met with no or not yet, right? The same old story in accessibility, where you always feel like we don't have enough people to do the work, and it's completely true. Design system teams are feeling the same. Time for some more polls. Design system teams are feeling understaffed. For an organization that has less than 100 people, guess 100 designers and engineers combined, guess how big the average design system team is for less than 100 folks. We've got number one at the back. Any numbers? 3. Any more? 2, 1, so 1, 2, 3. You're right. It's 3, which 3 was actually bigger than I thought it was going to be. 3 was thought it was quite large, but in design systems, I did more investment, and I think the full-time role of a design system person isn't necessarily what you could maybe work on it 2 or 3 hours a week and have some sort of design system like thing, which I think maybe what's been counted here. And then 100 to 499, it only jumps up by 1, right? So we have this maybe up to 5 times as many design system consumers, and we've only given the team 1 more member of staff. Right, final guess. More than 500 in their organization. What's the average team size? 4, 8, 10. Any numbers online? No. 6. So is that 6? 2 6s, all right. Actually, it's 9, right? So we're still under 10, right? For more than 900, and we've seen some organizations where there's 3,000 or 4,000 consumers, and they only have 15 people, right? And so what we're seeing is, it seems like maybe there's a lot in some places, and sometimes there's not, but they're feeling really understaffed. What I found really interesting is if I looked at this chart, you can kind of see a direct relationship between. I don't have the numbers for accessibility teams, but what I'm seeing, it's fairly similar numbers. We're having 3 or 4 for lower numbers, and then maybe 9 accessibility people for more than 500. We're seeing many design system accessibility teams, being scaled back in the last year to numbers like this. In the past, we've had a lot more, but we're seeing less of it. So we're feeling understaffed. They're feeling understaffed. That's great, because there's nothing better than getting in the room and connecting over the crap that leadership have done to our team, right? It's a really great bonding exercise. And so this is a great one to talk about as all the people you've lost along the way. It really actually gets you going. So it's a great thing to talk about. So they're feeling the same way you are. Top 6 design system issues. I want to go through all of the issues. It gets a little bit laborious, but these are the issues, and these issues are issues that we've already probably talked about in the last year as well. Lack of resources, staff. We talked about this. Difficulty in ensuring consistency across teams all the time in accessibility. Right? Why are we still talking about alt text? Right? 2025. Right? Prioritizing updates and ensuring accessibility and inclusivity. Number 4 on their list of the top issues design system teams are facing. Fantastic. Communicating gaps with teams and knowledge gaps in best practices. So most of those we see in accessibility teams too. Do you have a question back there? Go for it. Oh, we need a microphone. Sorry, just 1 second. Sorry.
Ensuring consistency across teams. What's the root cause there of these inconsistencies when using a design system?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you with certain facts, but what I've seen is mostly people not understanding the value a design system has for their product team or the business's view. And often the second reason is the way that leadership is rolling out a design system. It may be either an enforced thing, and some designers will try and find ways to stick it to the boss, or want to have their own freedom as a designer. We see that a lot. I want my freedom. Or design systems leaders don't, or team leaders don't provide enough oomph behind the design system, and then they don't feel like they need to adopt it. It tends to be either end of the scale. So, but some organizations do it great. So
lack of governance.
Lack of governance is probably, or too much governance. It's either end of the spectrum. Good times, but yes. Cool. Okay, so we've talked about the current state, how design system teams are feeling, and we're realizing they're feeling very similar to us in a lot of ways, which is really, really. I don't want to say great, because kind of it's like we don't want to have someone who's also in the hole with us. Hey, thank you for joining the hole too. But it means there is something that we can really share and work together on. So some breakdowns. Let's talk about breakdowns within accessibility teams and design system teams. What are we kind of bashing heads on a little bit? I hope that wasn't too loud on the mic. Bashing heads on a little bit, and let's have a look. So I think we're having some issues, breakdowns. Maybe not bashing heads, but we're missing the opportunity to communicate value together, right? We're always talking about what's the return on investment on accessibility, or design system, here's the things that we've delivered in the last 6 months was worth your time. Please continue funding our team. I know there's layoffs going on, but we need to have these people, right? This is the story we have to honestly do. So endless search to communicate return on investment, okay? But remember this about your design system team, and it's important to note this. And this is definitely why I'm not a licensed therapist, because you would never say to someone in a couple of counselor session, you have no value, right, on your own. But it's true, a design system has no intrinsic value on its own. It only has value when someone starts using the thing, right? That's the immediate time it has value. You can have the greatest component library in the world, but if nobody's using it, it provides no value to the organization, right? Accessibility is different, right? If you come in and you do one bug change, you've instantly added value. The barrier to entry of making value is much easier for accessibility teams. We can do things straight away, where design system teams have this whole other group. But what it means is opportunity for us to work with them and understand how they deliver value, and so that we can support them in their communication and their story for delivering value. And we should communicate how we deliver value ourselves and make sure they understand that. We can have this conversation about how can we deliver value together or communicate that story together. We'll go on a little bit more in a bit about how we can kind of bridge over to each other and talk about each other's value. But I think the biggest one that we struggle with is communicating responsibly about each other, right? We're very good at talking about ourselves when it comes to leadership meetings or teams, what do you call them? Everyone joins a team call, all hands and things like that, or talking about each other's teams, so ourselves, but not necessarily each other's teams. We have this great phrase that we hear in design systems all the time: our design system has accessibility built in, right? It's one of the key marketing phrases that you hear design system teams. And one of the reasons is getting people to adopt the design system is very, very, very difficult. Just some water. So difficult, in fact, that we're just not good at it. Like we're just pretty terrible at getting adoption. And it's been something that's been talked about for 3 or 4 years. And most organizations don't have quote good adoption. There's people now who are getting to 80 or 90% adoption, but most organizations are actually kind of struggling to get up there, even though the design system is fantastic. There's lots of design systems out there. So our design system has accessibility built in, but it's dangerous saying this. It's great at getting the initial, that draft, that initial getting people on board. But there's a point where if we start saying our design system has accessibility built in, that people don't understand what that means, we end up with actually a lot of times inaccessible code and outputs because we're using the design systems wrong, or we're thinking it's our savior, right? The design system is not our savior. It's something that helps us get there quicker and cheaper, but it's not everything, right? And you obviously all know this in this room, but we have to be careful and make sure that when we hear our design system partners say design system has accessibility built in, because they're trying to sell the design system, we need to make sure we talk to them that they're communicating that in a responsible way. On the other side, someone in accessibility, I've heard this at several organizations, this component is not accessible, right? It's very easy for us to say component X is not accessible. It's a dangerous thing to say that, right? It may be true. It may be true. Problem is I've talked about it, getting adoption from a design system team is very, very hard. They work for years and years to build trust in a design system, get that reputation. Most organizations have been through, at this point, 3 or 4 design systems, right? And the previous 3 are dead long before you got there, right? And we don't want number 4 to go down the same route. And so if we start saying the design system, so if we say the component's not accessible, it's going to start changing over time, you know, telephone and fear, because people want to comply with the local laws, or whatever it may be. We end up getting the story of the design system's not accessible. We can't use the design system. And we've seen this in several organizations. We need to make sure that when it is an issue, we talk about it and communicate it to the right people in a responsible way, so we don't end up causing fear or undermining the design system. There's a right way to go about fixing the issue than telling everybody in your team it's not accessible, right? We don't want that. We need to work together. So what are those opportunities for connection. I'll tell you this, design systems want to collaborate. It probably doesn't surprise you, but it's true. They want to collaborate because they understand, most of the design system teams I've worked with, there is a different, maybe a level of thought. Often design system practitioners have they kind of take things more a bird's eye view, and they know that all these things together. And I think often other areas of organization don't necessarily take that view. It's a great place for you to go in there and say, hey, I want to collaborate too. But they probably don't know, and I'm not giving this talk to the design system community yet, but they probably don't know how similar they are to you, right? Just say, basically, I put the talk, which I give to the design of accessibility, right? Just drop in, change design system with accessibility, it would all still be true. Right? They don't know how similar they are to us. And so we're struggling with all these same things. We want to collaborate with them, right? If we can achieve our goals much better in an organization, our accessibility maturity model, and trying to improve that, getting education out there, coming up with less defects at the end of our product, we can do that better if we have a collaboration with the design system and people are using it, right? So communicating that value, what's the opportunities for us to communicate that value? We kind of go back to our scary metric screenshot we have earlier of all the issues, all the ways that we can measure our design system. Let's talk about some of the ways that design systems are measured. It's an important thing to know how your counterparts are measured, so you can work together on those. So they're measured. I'm not saying how design systems measure. This is how they, as a team, are measured by leadership. If these numbers are low, right, the design system is failing, and leadership will often do something about it, right? Not every organization measures it in the same way. Not every leader measures it in the same way. It's a good note to have. But these are the common ways that people are starting to get measured because they want that return on investment. So adoption in design, right? Adoption in design usually means, are people using the components in Figma? That's ultimately usually what it means. How we measure that is in many different ways. It could be component instances. But we're seeing more and more organizations use and build their own tools to measure a design token adoption. That's becoming a common thing. Are they using actually the design tokens, or are they using the hex values, right? And so that is what they call an adoption in design. Adoption in code, this is something that we've probably had all experience with in some way, because ultimately that's where the design system provides its value. It's not in Figma, it's when a developer picks up some code in Visual Studio and puts it in there. So adoption code, again, this is done in various different ways because there's not a way to do it naturally, or natively, naturally, I'm not sure the word is. Each organization's had to build their own way of doing it. And there's some things to help us with that, but they're measured a lot, really, ultimately, on these two things, right? Are people using the thing that they're building? But there's plenty of other ways to do it. Product consistency. They're trying to measure product consistency in some ways, right? Is the component being used across the same flow within the same product area, right? They're starting to even break down adoption in different parts of the organization. But design system teams are already being measured by things like speed of development. Design system teams, they try and communicate their value often to leadership by measuring a product development lifecycle without the design system. And then they go in and say, hey, use the design system. We're going to measure you how long it takes to do this. And then we're going to communicate to leadership, hey, we've saved 20% of time. Problem is, leadership see that number and they go, okay, let's keep on measuring that. And if that number doesn't go down, or at least stays the same, then it looks like the design system team is not delivering its value. So those numbers that you communicate to leadership to deliver its value end up being the numbers you get measured against. And so speed of development is one of those things. Office hours attendees as well. Most of us in accessibility have office hours. Design systems also have office hours as well, or some sort of support channel, maybe Slack, a Slack channel. It may be, I don't know, email distributions. Are people going to the support channels and asking those questions? What are the questions being asked? Team happiness. there's many organizations, a design team and see, are people enjoying using the design system? And many of the reasons are nothing to do with the design system, if they're enjoying it or not, or it makes their job easier, but they are being measured on speed of design delivery as well. Contribution rate, a big thing in design systems in the last year has been something called a contribution model, which is all about, hey, we don't want to have 30 or 20 design system people working on a design system. We want to scale it back to 5, 6, 7, or 8. We want to be able to make it so everybody to contribute to the design system. And that's what it should be, right? The design system is owned by the organization. People are starting to get measured by the fact that are people in different teams, when they make a component for their flow, are they adding it to the design system so everybody else can use it? That contribution rate, if you look at standard open source material, is sort of 3 or 4%. And this number comes from Dan Mal's design scale. Are 3 or 4% of teams contributing to the design system? Well, my guess is leadership wants that number to be much higher because they don't realize how hard it is to contribute to a design system and make a scalable component. But they're being measured on that. So keep that in mind. And the number of components, this is one of my favorites. And the thing, if you talk to any person in the design system community, they hate being measured by this number because what on earth is a component, right? You could take a button and you just say it's one component, right? It is the button. Some would say it's 3 components. It's the border, it's the icon, and it's the label, right? Is that 3 components? It doesn't make sense, but it's a really easy number for leadership to understand, or at least they think at face value about the value the design system team is delivering. And then documentation engagement. Well, people are starting to add Google Analytics to their site. Are people coming to their pages? How long are they staying for? Because documentation has become our source of truth as a design system for everything that we provide. So these are the words. Yes, go for it, sir. Oh, we need a microphone. Sorry.
Things of value that design systems are supposed to give, besides being just a style guide, is staying up to date and staying current. Is there a metric or any sort of way to qualify that, or measure it? Does that go to satisfaction or a survey or something?
I've not heard of a leadership yet really measuring on, is the design system up to date with data standards, like is your design system on React 18? They may ask that question, but it's not necessarily something they're measuring. Design system teams, though, are often measuring what consuming teams are on. So there's often dashboards to see, hey, they're only on version 3.0 of our components. We released version 5.0 last year, right? All these product flows are quote unquote out of date. So they're being maybe measured on the fact that people aren't updating the new version of the design system, and what maybe the reasons behind that are.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And sometimes there's good reasons not to update the designs, update the latest version of the design system. And that's one of the issues with these kind of at face value metrics is using the latest version of the design system isn't always the right thing to do, because if it's a product in maintenance mode, right? Why invest in that? But that number doesn't really get added to that bit of conversation. Question back.
How about accessibility? Can you measure it with regard to a design system?
Maybe, and hopefully we'll get into that in a bit.
Okay.
But so that's going to go on. So as design system teams right now aren't really measuring accessibility, right? That some of them may be starting to think about it, but in a kind of across the board, design system teams are looking at these things and not necessarily the impact they're having on accessibility, which is where, again, we can open that conversation and find ways to help them communicate how they, more than just team adoption, but the value they're having on people with disabilities, right? Which is ultimately what we're trying to do here. And so here, actually, it was right here, but I know you don't go, so we can talk later. So here's one of the things that we can communicate but also the design system teams to communicate. What we should do is we should come together and we should start to communicate these high-level items together, because we have a bunch of numbers, they have a bunch of numbers, right? But we're not necessarily giving each other numbers and finding correlations between them, especially over time. So reduce design rework costs. That's one of the big values of design systems, is reducing that rework. One of the things that we do a lot as accessibility professionals is make sure that designs are accessible before we give them to developers, right? Because we know it costs money when an audit comes through and there's a color contrast issue, right? We could have fixed that 2 months ago at a fraction of the cost. So there's some correlated metrics, and each organization collects different metrics. And so you may not have adoption in design exactly as this is in your design system. You may not be tracking design accessibility bugs per release in your organization, but you'll get the general idea of things that are connected. So we can connect the adoption in design. So is a Figma file using a design system? Very hard to measure, but it's actually quite easy for us to measure in Figma. Is that me? Is a team in Figma using a design system? I don't know if you've ever been into our Figma analytics, but anyone in an organization is able to view who's using the design system. As a viewer, you can see the library analytics, and it is available for you to look at. So you can see which teams are or are not using the design system is there for you to look at. Design system, but accessibility, bugs and release. So if we can hit those things together and see that, let's call them team A is using the design system, and there's less bugs in our audits that we did last year or last month, wherever it may be, we can prove that there was some value in there. The investment that we put into the design system team, whether we just give them some feedback on a component, we actually put a person in there, which costs a certain amount of money. Here's the value that we provided, right? We can start to have those conversations and maybe put a dollar number on it. Then it's not perfect science. It never is when it comes to metrics and ROI, but it helps build that story up. We can help communicate how we're lowering engineering overhead and faster deployments. There's two things that the engineering leaders love: it's engineering overhead and faster deployments. Amazon once put out how they basically deploy every 10 seconds, right? And ever since then, engineering leaders want faster and faster deployments, and for good reason. But there are 4 correlated metrics that we can put together to help us build that story. So the adoption in code, which I kind of talked about earlier, is a website. If it's a new website or a new page in a website, what percentage of that is using coded components from the design system? Have we been able to measure the time it's taken to develop those releases? Can we look at zero velocity and see that thing took only 2 months to build, or 20 points versus something similar that they did last year in the organization? As it improves that time, right? But then we can also look at, again, our code accessibility bugs per release, whether that's through an audit, whether that's through automated testing, whether that's through manual testing, doesn't matter where it came from. You probably have somewhere in to communicate and source that from a code environment. Can you then connect that with the adoption code? Do you have an annotations kit? Are you measuring the usage of the annotations kit as well? And often our annotations kits directly influence the number of issues we find in the code. One team that I worked with a while ago released annotations kit and looked at the issues that were found in an audit, and had the engineer actually looked at the annotations, 50% of the issues would have never happened, right? They're already being solved for, but the engineer missed them. But if you, so there's value in the accessibility annotations kits, and many of you probably are already aware of those. If not, happy to chat about it later. But these 4 things, again, you can help tell a story about lower engineering overhead and faster deployments. And then finally, reduced training expenses. We always talk about accessibility issues or time it takes to do things, but we also spend vast amounts of money as an organization in either budget or time in doing training. Can we talk about the system support? Are people going to office hours? Are people reading our documentation? Right, those numbers are starting to be tracked by design system teams. We may be tracking them ourselves as accessibility professionals. Are people going to our office hours that we may be having, or similar support hours, or Slack channels? Right? Can we measure that against the adoption and design and code? Can we measure that against the accessibility budget per release? But can we measure that against our own training budgets in accessibility? Are we having to spend less time doing training, or at least basic training on what a H1 is, what a button is, what an image is, right? And an alt text is, right? Are we spending less time doing the stuff that we should be getting right by now and focusing on more advanced things that really help further the user experience of people with disabilities? So there's lots of different ways we can start build that stuff. Again, it's not perfect science. It's not easy to do. But if we actually talk to our design system teams and say, here's the metrics we're collecting. Hey, what metrics are you collecting? Here's what we found, our trends in the last year. There's definitely things there that we can share together and both come together and tell that story better together. So going back to kind of communicating responsibly, let's go back to one of our quotes. This component is not accessible. Right? What can we do to fix that? We should raise accessibility issues in channels that minimize damaging its trust and reputation. That's really important that we do that. Right? So it's not putting it in the team Slack channel. This component's not accessible. We should call a meeting about this at 4 o'clock today and get it fixed. Right? It is the design system team probably has channels to raise up issues. Maybe you kind of, I don't want to say do it quietly behind the scenes, but you just want to make sure that the people who are in the room who are going to see these issues aren't going to get freaked out by the fact that there is maybe an issue. Maybe you can just put a pull request in if you're able to, or have someone nearby who's able to, but just fix the issue itself and put it in. And so it's going to be sorted in the next pull request review. Our design system has accessibility built in. That phrase that we hear over and over again. I don't think it's going away, honestly with you, and I kind of like it. I think it's true. Accessibility has been built in some areas, right? And not everywhere, and it's not going to be complete. So be very clear about what the design system covers, who is responsible for what. We need to make sure that our design system team knows this and has ways to communicate that, because they're going to be talking to a lot of stakeholders that we're not going to talk to, and vice versa. One of the ways that I recommend design system teams do that, or organizations do that, is kind of post somewhere on the documentation site, kind of a systems accessibility ownership matrix. And it doesn't have to be this formal. I don't like to call it an SLA, but make it very clear about who is responsible for what in what area. So this is kind of taking the atomic design principles or the atomic design layout by Brad Frost. We've got our subatomic accessibility or design tokens. Our component accessibility, that's usually our atoms and our molecules. Our pattern accessibility, our page accessibility. And we can say that, hey, our design system team for our design tokens for our subatomic accessibility is responsible for creating the design tokens and guidelines that promote accessibility. It's your responsibility as a product team to use the design system correctly and avoid custom styles where possible. Component accessibility, it's their job to build and maintain accessible components and related guidelines. Right? It's kind of obvious, but it's very clear for the product teams, it is their job to implement components as intended and avoid unnecessary overrides. We can kind of go on, but it's and add in some examples. But my point being, it's really important that you make it clear and have this. I want a method of politely communicating with your design system consumers that this is where accessibility belongs, because you don't want to start accusing people of using the design system incorrectly. It's not a practical way to go about design system adoption and support and accessibility. Go for it. Only let me have a microphone here.
So just to be clear, how do you define the difference or overlap between patterns and components?
It's a blurry line, but generally, component is something that you could put in many different places. So it may be like your input to be used in multiple different places, in different contexts. It sort of can sit on its own. Your pattern is something where you try to see what we try to call them organisms, where you put in several things together. A navigation bar, for example, is a great example. You don't have multiple navigation bars on the same site. It's that one thing, but it's made up of several components into this one organism. So yeah, this is an interesting fact that I saw from that design system report. 89% of design system teams report that they include accessibility guidelines, which is fantastic. I mean, you wonder why we have really any accessibility issues, right? If nearly 90% of our design systems have accessibility guidelines, what's all the fuss about? Why do we still have jobs, right? Because I mean, it's a self-reported number, but accessibility guidelines is only so much of the accessibility story in design systems. We need to start thinking as accessibility teams beyond just accessible components. You know, design system teams spend a long time trying to communicate that, hey, we're more than just a component factory. For a long time, they were just component factories. But as we get into this 3 or 4 year mark of maturity, many design system teams aren't making components anymore, right? They're going much further and beyond that. And we need to start thinking the same way. So think beyond just making accessible components. This is from Agoda. This is an organization who's created, I don't know how big this is for you all at the back. They've created a custom plugin called ADS Lint. It's for their design system, and designers are meant to run this when they make a thing in Figma to make sure that it's following all their design system best practices that they can check automatically. It's quite an advanced thing, but you'll notice that on there they have a color contrast checker. Right? It's something that we have in many tools already, like Start and DQ and all the some of the big names, and some small open source contrast checkers out there too in Figma. But it's interesting that they've built into their tool because design systems aren't just, again, components, right? They represent how we work. And I don't have a screenshot, unfortunately, of a color contrast picture, but if there's certain ways that you want to communicate color contrast to your designers, or different standards that you may have within your organization, and this is a great way to build a process of how designers work and define color contrast. They even have an accessibility onboarding part of their plugin where it says how to meet accessibility standards in your designs. So they collaborated with the accessibility teams and design system teams to have accessibility onboarding in their Figma plugin, right? Which means we don't have to have this Confluence page somewhere on the accessibility websites that says this is how accessibility is. We've kind of made it front and center because designers are going to be using this to help make sure that their code, their designs, their standards. So we're kind of putting it in front and center. So it's a great collaboration between design and accessibility, thinking beyond just components. This here is from GitHub, from my good friend Jan, helped me make the CBS annotations kit. He's just released an article with GitHub about what we kind of called design system precepts. And he's gone as far as to kind of build these precepts into the components in Figma. So we have on the right, sorry, on the left here, we have a precept for the icon button components. So rather than re-annotate every single component, or every single instance of a component in Figma, we just have preset annotations for that particular component. Just know, here's the things I actually need to annotate. Everything else is already built in. I don't need to say that this is going to be a button element, right? I'm using the design system. It's already using the button element as long as the developer uses whatever this may be. I guess icon button, right? That is going to come out as the button element. But what they have added here is that a framework for step-by-step things that designers can use to annotate this in an accessible way. So button label, description, some things that add in by default, like icon alt and aria hidden true. It provides a more accessible way, not say accessible way, a lower barrier way for people who aren't accessibility professionals, who don't understand HTML, and providing a level above that from a traditional annotations kit where you have to really understand all the semantics behind a web page or an iOS or Android view, and helps it make it a more available to designers who don't really understand accessibility, but kind of understand at this point what a label is and what alt text is, right? They know when to use the skills that they've learned at what points, rather than having this open sandbox where they feel like they have to annotate everything. We don't have to annotate everything. We only have to annotate the key details and it's important context for application. That was interesting. We used, sorry, I run it for reduced notion where it kind of froze up. This is from the Pinterest design system. They have a hook in React, and what that means is it's just a method that their React developers can use to make it easier to do things, right? In this case, they have a hook called use reduced motion, and when a developer uses that in their code, much easier. The media query prefers reduced motion, which basically when someone has that toggle turned on in their operating system, some places it's turn off motion, some places it's reduced motion. It's reduced motion usually on the web, but they made it much easier for developers to access that property or function, sorry, and support that. Whereas most websites struggle to support this right now because it's kind of a advanced level, something that's in the CSS. They've brought this into their utility classes near the top of their documentation site, but it's very clear that we want to support reduced motion, and here's an easy way to do it. Right? It's a great collaboration beyond just the components that allow people to make things more accessible. We can show leadership, hey, we've made this tool class with the design system team called reduced motion. It's been used 100 times. Here's 100 cases where we've turned off motion because the user doesn't want to see it, right? Which is great value. Maybe hard to put a dollar value on it, a dollar number on it, but it's very easy to communicate that value and a collaboration together. So let's think about our new relationships agreement. Here's some key kind of principles to take away with you, and you probably have some in your head already. But check your accessibility strategy. If you're if you're able to do that, or you have an accessibility strategy, or you're close with someone who has created it, is the design system a core pillar in your strategy? Right? It should be in this day and age to have that in there. I strongly believe without design systems, we're not going to be able to produce accessible content at scale, right? Across many different designers, many engineers, many teams. Right? The design system helps us get there. It's really important. It's a core pillar. Because honestly, accessibility actually is a core pillar in most design systems. You check most design system principles, right? It mentions accessibility and inclusion, right? Maybe it's just a marketing thing, right? And that's partly probably what it is, but they do believe that they can help make change when it comes to that stuff. Ask your accessibility design team, ask your design system team if they've considered their critical role in driving accessibility maturity. We may have recognized that they are critical for our maturity, and they may be already in our core pillars. But do you think they have recognized that you are relying on them for success, for accessibility in your organization? And they probably haven't. Or they may have, but there's lots of different priorities, right? So remind them, even if they already know this, remind them, hey, we're trying to get to this goal by 2020, June 2025. We need you to do it because without you, we are not going to get there, right? And remind them every single week that we need you to focus on this more. So some agreements that you should try and have with your design system team, and you should have with yourself. Even if they don't agree with you, you can start doing these things anyway. Agreement number one, start sharing metrics and identify new trends together. Right? Don't just share your metrics with leadership, share them with everybody in the design system team. Here's what we found. Here's what we think you can use. Hopefully it's helpful. That may start a little spark in their head that they want to do the same thing back to you. And there'll be numbers there that they will love and be really thankful for that you shared. So make an agreement with yourself, start sharing those metrics if you have them. Agreement number two, actively take part in each other's roadmap and planning and listen. Right? Don't just look at the roadmap and go, oh, that looks good. Try and take a more active role and think, okay, you're working on this. maybe you're working on this Figma plugin. Hey, there's a great opportunity that I saw on LinkedIn for integrating a color contrast picker or accessibility onboarding elements into your design, into your plugin. Can we work on that? Can we add it to the next quarter or next PI? Right? Be active in finding new ways and innovation to help the design system team be better. Maybe the design system has some ideas that you can do as an accessibility team to help them make the design system better. The design system is going to be a great distribution network to make accessibility happen if we can use it right. Agreement number 3, understand each other's priorities and challenges and then support each other. I can't stress that enough. We need to understand the things that they're struggling with and kind of been through already. They feel many of the same ways as you. They're also trying to do many of the same things you're doing. So try and support each other in any way you can. And you're all very smart people. You'll find ways straight away that you can support each other on. So just a reminder, and this is one of my favorite quotes about design systems from Brad Frost: design systems are how the official story of how your organization designs and builds digital interfaces, right? It's more than just a component library. It's how we work, right? And how we work is accessibly, right? That is how we work. But if that's not through every single part of the DNA in the design system, we don't get there. And there's so much opportunity for you as accessibility professionals to do that. There's so much opportunity for them to work with you to make your accessibility team even better. So find ways to remove silos. Here's again the kind of image of me and my friend George. Find a way to remove those silos, be a driving force for change together. As the challenge I mentioned earlier, I would love to hear at the end of the year, if anyone got here, become best friends with your design system team. Be best friends. And if you're not already best friends, right, make it so clear that everyone's jealous of your relationship. They want to be like you and the design system team, right? That's so important, especially in an age where we're trying to do more with less. So that's a wrap. Thoughts and questions, happy to stay and chat later on as well. Oh yeah, and also there's a QR code for my LinkedIn if and then you want to chat offline or online as well. So. Cool. Yeah, go for it.
I guess I'm kind of curious about training and kind of interaction between and regularity of meetings when you kind of get together to work on things like collaborating with. Is there things that you do kind of set up structurally, like kind of a certain structure to review things or periodically, or is it just organic, how you've experienced it? Design system and particularly, but also accessibility. I think that just how design system functions as regimented going forward, process engineering, basically.
Design teams are all very, very different. They really do reflect the organization that they're in. And so if you have an organization that has this very structural process and you come and review every week, your design system team will likely follow that. If your organization doesn't have that approach, it's more of this laissez-faire, we check when we check, the design system is going to be honestly probably the same, because it really is a reflection. So I recommend that you find ways to really build in those reviews as our design system works. So it may be, you may have those checks from the team, hey, once a week, let's come together and review what we built. That works great. I've also seen it work where we check once you built it every quarter, right? It doesn't work as well, in my opinion, for making accessible components, but it does work within the way that the organization works. And so,
yeah, kind of group that I didn't hear much about, and that's development. As a designer is coming up with the components and systems and accessibility is brought in there, how does development, who are going to put these things out there and implement them potentially? Because I've been in that situation before where there's a bottleneck of, understaffed people, but then also a dependency on development to get something out a chunk of code at the same time that the component is put into Figma.
Yeah, design system should never hold up a product development process. So if we need to release a product on Tuesday and the design system is not ready, the design system can wait. The adoption is not as important to get that thing out on time. We can go back and make changes later. So yeah, never let, there's a great article from Nathan Curtis called Pace Layers, and it really talks about how the design system is going to be the slowest moving thing in our organization. Product teams move much faster than we do. We should never slow them down. And we should just find ways at the right opportunity to make them go faster when the opportunity fits. Cool. Well, if no more questions, then take some stickers with you. Happy to chat, and I'll see you around all week. So appreciate you all staying, and